Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of the eMLB Insider Podcast. My name is AnjouPays, alongside my co-host. I can't speak. My co-host JR. How are you doing tonight, JR?
Pretty good, Andrew. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. Baseball season is officially underway. We mentioned in our previous podcast that our teams were undefeated, and also our guests team is undefeated as well. As we got AidenOnAir with us tonight. His Tampa Bay Rays are currently undefeated, as well as my Cardinals and JR's Reds. But Aiden is not connected with the Rays in our franchise like myself and JR connected to our favorite teams. Aiden is the first year GM of the Atlanta Braves. Took over for Shamrocks in the late offseason. Didn't even really get a chance to do much in terms of free agency, as that was mostly wrapped up by the time he took over. But welcome to the podcast, Aiden. Glad to have you on. How are you doing
I'm
today?
glad. I'm glad to be here. I'm doing well. Shout out to Charles. I was sort of a part of the Rays organization when my player was over there last year. Got drafted. We're almost to draft time here. I think Wednesday night is the draft, and you know it's the coolest experience in the eMLB. Getting drafted to your favorite team, even though I was there waiting till the second round. I remember I was like sitting in my college dorm room, just sitting there like I'm waiting. The first round they take Ashlis Dudley, and then waiting and waiting. No one goes in the first round, and then second round I'm taken, and it turned out to be the right move as I got traded over to myself once I made the move. But now I'm the number 4 prospect in eMLB, so second round steal, I'll definitely call that.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm gonna say I passed on you in the first round, and I'm regretting it. I need a catcher. I well, no. Let me take that back. I've got MJ Melendez. He's a fantastic defensive catcher. He's just not the best with the bat. So anyway, but yes, he Aiden has been with us for a couple seasons now. First as a community creative player, and now as a GM. What are some of the difficulties that you had when you first jumped on as a GM in the eMLB universe?
So the biggest difficulty I have is learning OOTP. I only started playing for like half a season in 22 once I found Commission's stream. And so a lot of it is learning the like different parts of OOTP. Like, okay, how do I figure out how pitch counts work? How do I figure out how to use my relievers? How do I figure out 7-day lineups, or making sure that I play players not tired, or switching my lineups for left versus right, setting my depth charts, who do I use as pinch hitters, all that sort of stuff. So the hardest thing for me is because I'm a baseball guy. I love baseball, been growing up around it, working as a broadcaster this summer. I'm really excited and been working as a broadcaster for a while now. I love the game, and I have the knowledge of the game, but now it's taking it and putting it into a video game was the hardest thing.
Yeah, and when you talk about that, Aiden, as we look at our season right now, we're roughly halfway or so through the year. We're coming up on the All-Star break. What are some generally thoughts about where your team is at right now? How do you feel about where the Braves are?
I like the progress we're starting to make. We're struggling. We've struggled pretty heavily. But I'm happy to see where some of the guys are coming. My prospects are having really good seasons down in the minors. Having one of the top farm systems in eMLB, it's nice. But my bullpen is starting to turn it around. But I'm definitely not pleased with where I'm at. I was really thinking we would be up towards the top of the East right now. I never say never, because we all know in baseball things can change in a second. But the season doesn't look great. But 9 games out, it's been done. My Rays did it back in 2012 when they came back in the wild card from 11 games back in the month of September. So it is possible. It's not impossible, but I'm hoping that in the next few sims, we went 2-2 the last sim after going 0-4 the one before that. So I'm hoping in this next sim, this 7-day sim on Sunday, as we're recording this, that we can hopefully see a turnaround, and I can't remember if we play 6 or 7, but a 4-2 or a 5-2 somewhere around in there, get us back in the win column for sure, and maybe pick up a few games in the East in the wild card.
Yeah, you're playing 3 against the Phillies and 3 against the White Sox. So you got 6 games coming up as we're leading into the All-Star break. Speaking of the All-Star break, do you have players on your team that you think will be shoo-ins to make the All-Star team?
if Antonio Alvarez does not make the All-Star game, this voting is completely rigged. And I will say that right here, right now. I mean, this man for a rookie is having an outstanding season, really leading our team, and has stepped up when some of our other bats haven't. You know, Freddie Freeman's having a good season, but I'm not getting I'm getting some of the production I want out of Grayson Janista. I don't know how much I could expect out of him as a DH candidate, but Ozzy Albies has struggled. Johan Camargo isn't exactly doing what I want. And my catching situation, Aiden Pearson was up for a little bit and did okay, but my catching situation, Wilson Contreras went down with a 4 to 6 week injury over the season, and Stephen Vogt has, done what, or not Stephen Vogt, pardon me. Wow, the name escapes me.
Dalton Varsho.
Dalton Varsho. I was thinking of West Coast catchers. Dalton Varsho has stepped in and he's done okay in there, but I think my offensive production has been lackluster outside of Alvarez. So I think Alvarez is a shoo-in, and I've definitely got some pieces in the bullpen who I think deserve to get a call as well. But I think probably Freeman and Alvarez will probably get calls if I was a betting
man. So Aiden, obviously as we once we get through the All-Star break, we're at that point where the trade deadline is just a couple of weeks away. That's the spot where teams pretty much have to decide, are we going to be contenders and we're going to try to be buyers at the trade deadline, or, are we going to try to maybe sell some pieces off and, try to look ahead more toward 2026 and beyond. So where do you think your team falls at this point as we look ahead toward the trade deadline?
I think I'm a 50-50 right now, and I keep going back and forth. And for me, I think there are some pieces that we can definitely sell off. A guy like Freddie Freeman, a guy like AJ Minter, potentially a Dalton Varsho as well. Those are all names that we could look to sell on, potentially a Luke Jackson as well. Some of my older guys who are on some money, potentially we could look to move on from. But at the same time, I've got the number 5 farm system in all of baseball. If I need to go make a move and I feel like there's the right player out there to bring in that could potentially make us a push, we're not out of the wild card yet. We're not even out of the division yet. We've seen Baltimore pick up pace. We've seen teams pick up pace. If I go on if I have a few consecutive, if I go 5-2, if I go 4-2 this next sim, if I go, then I go 2-1, 2-1, 2-1. Like I'm picking up games. So I think there's a potential that I could be a seller, but at the same time, I think if the right move comes across my desk, I could be a buyer.
Yeah, it just goes to show that just a couple of weeks could completely change the outlook of your team because, and I quote from our Discord server, in all caps, Braves are selling and willing to listen to anyone.
I take it very much. I take it very much like a Rays approach on it, like real life Rays. Like I'm willing to listen to anybody. I'll be honest. I've had a few conversations about some superstars on my team. I think the GMs around the league know that I have a pretty high asking price on some of those players. I'm not willing to give them up, especially a lot of them are younger, have team control, high potential. I'm not exactly willing to just give them up. So I'll take, what I can find. And at the same time, I'm willing to listen on anyone at any point in the season. But at the same time, I'm going to make sure whatever deal I get is right for my team.
So do you think the big blockbuster trade of the summer could come with Atlanta?
There's a potential for it. There are a few teams who have made a phone call or two about a few specific players. I will say this right now because I have had some GMs reach out, and GMs, I hope you're listening. Antonio Alvarez is not going anywhere. You all can stop calling. Y'all can,
Sorry, that was my next
hang
question.
Up the phone. Y'all can hang up the phone right now. Antonio Alvarez isn't going anywhere.
Okay, but we've already heard you mention Freddie Freeman, who is definitely one of your top players. You also have like Mike Soroka in your rotation, who's been one of the best pitchers over the past few years. You've also got Acuna in the outfield, who's not really playing his best baseball. You've got Albies, you mentioned, isn't playing his best baseball. The problem is, if you're wanting to, I mean, you mentioned those high asking prices. Do you think the performances of some of those players might deter teams from paying that price?
I think so. I mean, obviously that's something you have to think about, but I think at the same time, you look at these guys' track records, and I know people look at track records over ratings, especially in OOTP, but you look at what these guys bring to the table and rating-wise as well. Some of them still got room to grow, and some of them still are in their prime and things like that. I think Right now, I would be stupid not to capitalize on Freeman's value right now, just because he's in an age 35 season, if I'm not mistaken, and he's hitting the ball really, really solid. So I'd be stupid not to potentially look at moving him. And a guy like Minter, his ERA is a little high right now, but I still like what he's doing. And a guy like Luke Jackson is having a really good year too. So those are guys I can move on from. Albies is Albies has got a high asking price just because I just re-rated him and I want to see what he can do. Same with Acuna. I think he's obviously a superstar and he's a staple in Atlanta. And my outfield, I think any other season, my outfield is the best outfield in baseball.
Wow.
That's a bold
That's a pretty
statement.
good
Well,
statement.
he said any other season, so he's acknowledging that they're not playing up to the potential of who they are as players.
I mean, Pache and Acuna are both having down seasons, but if Alvarez can perform at 75% of this next year and we have Acuna and Pache just play like they're supposed to, it's the best outfield in baseball, and I'm willing to fight that fight with anyone.
Yeah, if I had a better right fielder, I'd fight you on that because I've got Adele and Aguilera, and
fair.
My right fielder has been a revolving door this season, so I can't argue against that.
Now, Aiden, you mentioned earlier the injury to Max Fried to start out the year, which that was a tough blow for you guys. Especially knowing that Fried and Mike Soroka and Ian Anderson, those guys have really been kind of the backbone of this team over the last couple of seasons. Even before you were the GM, but they've been really a strong point. Knowing that Soroka's already signed to a 7-year extension back in March, so he's locked up for the long term. And knowing that you've got a lot of talented young pitching coming up, how hard is that to juggle whether you'd look to sign a Max Fried or an Ian Anderson or both, potentially to a long-term deal?
Both of them have been great guys here in Atlanta. But the question then goes to, do I try to capitalize on value? Ian Anderson's having an okay year. I mean, there should be some value there. Max Fried, I don't see going anywhere. I see us potentially looking into locking him up. It's really going to come down to what I can see, what the numbers say, what our budget sits at, and also, to be honest, how many extensions I have available. I've already used 2 this season, so it's really going to come down to who else needs to be extended, because I sort of took this advice from some other GMs. I'm saving 2 of my extensions in case I make a move at the deadline for, a rental who needs to be extended. A guy, I'm not saying we're trading for this guy, but a guy like potentially a Buster Bluth of some form or something like that.
Yeah, for those of you that are new to the eMLB and not aware of what we're talking about in terms of extensions, we do have house rules that this league has to try to keep the balance of the league across the board. And one of those balancing rules is that each team is only allowed to sign an extension for 4 of their current roster players. If you have signed 4 players, anyone else that has an expiring contract is not allowed to be re-signed. Anyone who has an expiring minor league contract is not allowed to be re-signed unless you add them to your 40-man roster. So what Aiden was talking about there is he's used 2 of his extensions. Who have you used the extensions on this year?
I want to say one of them was Corbin Klaus, and the other one was Soroka.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so now he was mentioning he's got 2 left, and it might be smart to hold on to them to see if he adds any pieces he might want to re-sign if they have expiring contracts, instead of extending someone that might have arbitration or middle of the arbitration or something like that. So definitely a smart move from a GM. Since you are a new GM, how you mentioned that you've been talking with other GMs. How helpful have other GMs been? Have been they like guarded, like don't want to like give too many hints to my opposition, or have they been like more like, hey, let me show you how things work here?
So some more than others. I can say you, Anju, you and I have had some discussions about things. My old GM, Charles and I were really close down in Tampa, especially when I was a player. Him and I worked a lot on how we wanted to build my player and figure out what was best for him. And he's given me a lot of really good advice. Cody's thrown in a little bit of advice. Aaron's thrown in a little bit of advice. So some more than others. And we sort of have a little group sometimes we refer to it as the new GM support group. Basically, all the guys in the AL Central and me. We have our we meet every Thursday, guys. So make sure you come join. No, but we sort of all, especially me and Sadier, and me and Minerva, the three of us sort of talk pretty frequently, throwing ideas at each other of, hey, did this work for you? Hey, did this work for you? Not necessarily specific players, or specific things, but ideas more or less.
Yeah, you come into that meeting and say, "Hi, my name's Aiden. I haven't made a trade in 2 weeks." Hi, Aiden.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Cody might need to attend Trades Anonymous. I don't know.
Yeah,
or actually no,
we meets on Wednesdays.
We actually talked about this in the podcast
Brendan
that's coming up.
I
was about to say Brendan. We literally talked about how all trades of this sim only included all of them included the Baltimore Orioles.
I can say Brendan's another guy who I've reached out to, and him and I have had some good conversations as well, and he's helped me out with a lot. The one thing I have noticed is GMs are very close to hold their value. If they have something that they want to keep, I know especially some GMs are very much, if they have a value, if they have an evaluation on something, they stick to that, not pointing any fingers.
No, you're pointing them directly at me. I know you are.
I'm pointing them direct. I'm being very direct.
So a little bit of insider info. We had been in talks in a trade. We're not going to talk about the specifics, but he was wanting a specific player that I was not willing to give up. So you're right. There are GMs that hold on to specific players because they may even have a higher evaluation than their scouts do. I know in other trade negotiations I've had that people have been asking for a prospect. I'm like, yeah, I understand. Like the value makes sense, but I think I like this player better than what my scouts are telling me. So one of the things I think is great about eMLB is the fact that all of the GMs across the board, I don't think you're going to find anyone who's just going to be like, no, I don't want to help you. I'm just going to like block you so you don't get any advantage over me. I think any GM you talk to, whether it's like trade negotiations or just say, hey, can I ask a couple questions about how OOTP works? They're going to be pretty open about helping people. And so like the people with new GMs like Aiden, like the members of the AL Central can get on board and become competitive right away. And I think that's a great thing about the eMLB.
Yeah, I think everyone in here has been very helpful and receptive, and I think it shows what kind of a good community commission is built here with old GMs, new guys coming in. And, I am the youngest GM in the league, so sometimes, I need to ask for help in those different regards.
I don't think youth has a bearing on how well you can run a team in OOTP. Some young players have the better mindset of running a team. Some people might be stuck in nostalgia. Like I know for me, I still have Goldschmidt on my team. So.
Hey, I'm stuck in nostalgia at the fact that people are like I made a trade. I negotiated a trade that fell through at some point over the offseason, and they were like, well, this player has a 2 WAR higher. I'm like, I don't care about their WAR. I'm looking at their on-base percentage. I'm looking at their batting average, their slugging percentage. It's a whole nother conversation, but yeah. WAR is my least favorite stat in major leagues because you can't value what the replacement is. I'm sorry, but I'm also a big thing in regular major leagues, but also eMLB because of personalities and things like that. What do you value their clubhouse effect, their locker room effect? Mm-hmm. Like Mike Trout's locker room effect is different from Matt Duffy on the Angels right now. You know what I mean? They're different. That you can't measure the off the field stuff. So for me, WAR is taken with a grain of salt.
Yeah, that's true. That's one thing that OOTP actually has that's unique to them that something like MLB The Show doesn't have, is that you have the different personalities of the players that can have an effect in a locker room. Like you see with the biggest example that comes to mind of a negative effect is Michael Kopech. Like in 2 different leagues that I'm a part of, he has been a locker room issue. And I was one of the teams that owned him. I was the GM of the White Sox in another league where Kopech was at the time. And he was, I didn't re-sign him. I just let him go when he hit arbitration because I didn't want to deal with him anymore.
That's fair.
Now, one thing, Aiden and Andrew and I talked about this a little bit on our podcast was, looking ahead at the draft coming up here, it feels like there is a large number of community-created players that are going to be in the draft here. Now, you have the vantage point of you've gone through that being, a non-GM who has a community-created player that, you're looking to see where they're drafted. And now, coming at it from the GM perspective, how do you approach evaluating the community creative players as you head into the draft?
So I don't want to give away too much of my hand. Obviously, we want to keep some things to ourselves. But I think for me, I look at obviously activity. Are they active in the stream? Do I see them doing boosts? Do I see them doing X, Y, and Z? I also look at position. My pitching farm system is stacked. Again, you can never have too much pitching, but I'm light at other areas. Do I want to look and get a guy at a different area who I can work with? I also look to see, and this may sound stupid to some people, but me and Ashlis Dudley, him and I actually have a good relationship outside of OOTP, just like talking in Discord DMs. And him and I created this whole storyline together about moving through the minors, and we were traded together from Tampa to Atlanta. And that was one thing I told Charles I wanted. And him and I have sort of followed each other and stayed at the same level together outside of when Aiden was up at the MLB for a couple weeks. And like part of the storyline that we built that I think was so unique to eMLB is that we've been roommates since we were drafted. Like it's cool things like that I look at. So how willing are you to be active with me and work with me? If you're a second baseman and I want you to work on your fielding or your speed, like, are you willing to work with me? And I'll be honest with you. There's at least one CCP in my team right now that I may be potentially looking to move just because I don't think he's willing to work with me and he isn't that active. Like I put a big emphasis on that, especially if I'm going to spend a high draft pick on you as a CCP.
Yeah, I think
that's fair.
The consensus was like with last draft, we got to about the middle of the second round and the CCPs were pretty much all gone by that point. This time we have potentially like 2 full rounds of CCPs plus the generated prospects from OOTP itself. So this could be one of the most stacked.
Plus the 1.0 players.
Plus 1.0 players that are coming in. This could be one of the most stacked draft classes ever. You got to be feeling good if you're a team at the top of the draft order, like someone like San Francisco, looking at some of these top prospects for the future.
My question is, which one of Danny's players is going to get picked? Jandy Ronson or Danny Jr.? Which one of the two is going to get picked first overall?
I don't think we should answer that. I think we should answer that on our other podcast special that we're going to do.
Fair. Hey, just food for thought.
How about we'll give a little teaser. I honestly, I think it depends on what San Francisco's needs are. I think Jandy has a better chance of going number 1 because I think pitching might be more valuable to San Francisco. I don't know.
I also think pitching, looking at sort of the draft pool that hasn't exactly been finalized, I think pitching is a little more scarce in this draft. Like the high end is good, but once you get outside of that high end, that low end is not exactly where, the greatest quality. So if you can get a high end pitcher, even if you don't use him and you look to trade him for another piece, you want to take advantage of that now, because I think there are a lot of good creative position players.
Yeah. Not only a high end pitcher, but one that's going to be pretty polished already when you draft him. I think that takes away a lot of the variance of picking somebody number 1. Having to worry about them, developing through the minor league system and potentially having injuries before they get to the majors. I mean, this player is most likely going to be able to could jump right into the majors potentially. Probably won't, but won't be long before we see him in the majors.
You see, I almost thought about suggesting a rule in eMLB rule change to make it so that way first year player drafts have to stay in the minors for their first half a season that they're drafted. I feel like especially in regular Major League Baseball, you don't really see players jump from the draft to the major leagues. We saw it in 2020 just because of the weird COVID season, but outside of that, you don't really see it. So, for me, I think especially picking in the 20s, I'm going to look to see what I can find. I'm not necessarily guaranteed to go with a CCP, but at the same time, if I find one that I think is going to fit my team, that's where I'll go with it.
So, kind of getting to the end of our interview here, what are some things that you think you can do in future seasons that you've learned that you might not have done so well this season?
How to set my lineup, what to look for in my lineup especially, and then also how to set up the bullpen. Now understanding what specialists do, middle relief, long relief, closer setup, what all that stuff does, high leverage versus non-high leverage, all that kind of stuff. That's sort of what I've noticed. And at the end of the day, I think also it'll be looking to sign better contracts and being a little bit, even though I think I'm already pretty stingy with trades, being a little stingier and finding the right guys rather than just making a trade to make a trade because I want to have fun.
Yeah, you don't want to jump on board of that. Oh, everyone's making a trade. I want to make one too.
Exactly. I think I've been a culprit of that a little bit.
Yeah, I think I've actually done that in the past. I actually mentioned this in the podcast this week. A lot of my former players are in Chicago right now, helping them compete in the AL Central. I'm looking at like, I could have had that.
Look, what I will say is, it's difficult to watch sometimes, but at the same time, I'm pretty happy with a lot of the moves I've made, and I think it's made my team a whole lot better. And so far, none of the pieces that I've traded away have come back to haunt me yet. I say yet because
They're in the minors.
Alex Murray and Doc Luger over in Tampa, I'm waiting for them to hurt me. But at the same time, I got a really good prospect in myself. I also added some really good other pieces, and some of them could be coming up to the majors very soon.
Yeah, from my standpoint, Aiden, probably the last question that I've got for you, just talking again about the system that you've got there. Once we get through the trade deadline, once we get past that, and we get to the last couple months of the season, who are a couple guys, 2 or 3 guys that we could look forward to seeing get a taste of the majors during those last couple months of the season that you're excited about?
So when Contreras went down, we called up Pearson for a little bit. I think he'll definitely get another taste of the majors, especially if I move Vogt or Contreras, or not Vogt. Wow, Varsho or Contreras.
Those V-name catchers are catching you a little bit.
Especially when Vogt used to play for Tampa Bay, and he's on my mind every once in a while. But no, I think Pearson will definitely get another look. We'll probably see Sam Saseda at some point again up in the majors. He started the season on the team, and then I'll give you 2 more names, just sort of throwing them out there. If he didn't go down, Goss would have been up earlier in the season. He would have come up pretty early in the season. And then also, I think we could see Eric Rivera, the 2-way player. He's been pitching really well in AAA. I'm just waiting to see if I can get a little more out of his bat.
Yeah, Goss, you just recently called up Goss. He's made a few starts for you at this point now, right?
Yeah, he was hurt to begin the season. He had a forearm strain for the first 2 weeks of the season. But Justin Gibbs went down, and that one hurt me because it was him and Saseda for my number 5 starter at the beginning of the season, and he went down, so we went with Saseda, but I really wish I could have brought him up.
Yeah, another community created player. That was I don't know if you know this, the Justin Gibbs player was created by one of the best friends of the former GM. I don't know if
yes,
you knew
so
that.
I've heard. I tried to get in contact with him, but haven't heard anything back.
Okay.
but I knew he was a CCP, but he's a hell of a CCP at that.
Yes,
and
he is.
Just knowing my rotation, what it could look like in the next 2-3 years, the NL East better watch out because this Atlanta Braves team is going to be very good.
We were talking in our podcast about how dangerous the national lineup looks, especially with the hot start of their rookie Mark Diggs batting almost 500 after a month. So you're going to need a good starting rotation to compete with that lineup.
Look, I don't talk bad about any team, but no one in the NL East has the depth that I have, and no one in the NL East has the pitching that I have. And I'm confident in saying that within the next 2 years, you're going to be talking about the Atlanta Braves as the perennial division winners.
All right, write it down, everyone. That is a bold statement from Atlanta Braves.
Book it.
Oh man, he's booking it. Oh man,
book it.
All right, guys, you heard it here first. Aiden Pearson, the GM of the Atlanta Braves, saying that they are going to be the team to beat in the NL East in the Cup. You said within 2 to 3 years.
Within 2 to 3 years, I think once we see Saseda get a little more, Pearson get a little more, Dudley get a little more, and some of the other pieces, especially with some of the other guys, Alvarez getting more time, Acuna will be having a little more time, Pache, Albies. This team is going to be a good mix of young and veterans. We'll have Soroka and potentially Fried manning the line. We got some really good young bullpen arms. And not to mention, we've got a few other tricks up our sleeve that we're potentially looking into right now.
All right. Sounds good. Well, we look forward to seeing how it all plays out. Thank you, Aiden, for joining us this evening, being our first official interview on the eMLB Insider Podcast. We appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight, and good luck the rest of this season, whether or not you sell to look forward for the future or you still try to compete this season. Best of luck to you and your team.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
All right. Thank you guys for watching. And until the next interview, guys, we'll see you later and take care. Well, that's a really interesting take, because we did notice that in our Discord that you kind of said that in all caps, we are selling and we are willing to listen on anyone. Actually, guys, can you hold on for a second? I need a pause. I thought my recording had frozen, so I'm going to double check to see if it was or not, or if it was just me pulling up OOTP that just made it freeze. So give me 1 second.